You're listening to the Growth Stories podcast, the show where I interview business owners, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to hear their stories about how they've grown and scaled their businesses to amazing heights. I'm your host, Ben Landers, and in today's episode, I have something special for you. In the past, I've interviewed business owners and entrepreneurs, but in today's episode, I'm speaking with a marketing leader from a private equity company that invests and acquires HVAC and plumbing companies from all around the United States. Our conversation is wide-ranging. We talk about everything from private equity, how business owners in the trades can think about private equity, and we talk about this company's model and what makes them unique and different. We talk about the importance of data, competitive analysis, testing, and putting your customer at the center of everything you do from a marketing perspective. And my guest ends giving you a tip, something that you can use to improve your marketing performance. And it's something that every business owner listening to this show has at the ready. So sit back, listen, learn, and most importantly, enjoy. All right, Alison, welcome to Growth Stories. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning.
Well, for starters, for the listening audience that isn't familiar with you and your company, give us an intro.
Excellent. Well, I'm Alison Albrecht. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Granite Comfort, and we are a private equity company that purchases and invests in HVAC companies and plumbing companies around the United States.
I saw you went to school in Ohio, right?
Yeah, right where Mike lives. Yep.
Yeah, so Mike Wilson, who's our president, he actually lives in Delaware.
Which is where I went to college. Yes.
Yeah, and then Dinesh and I, Dinesh, who's our CTO, and I were both at Ohio University. Dinesh is a professor, and me.
Yes, at Athens. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. That's cool.
Ohio is known for having tons of great colleges and universities, and it's a great liberal arts college state for liberal arts colleges, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little envious of that. I'm in Maryland now, and my wife is from Ohio, and she's always like, if we move back to Ohio, not only is the cost of living much cheaper, but there are a million schools for the kids to
for sure
pick from. So how did you kind of walk us through, maybe just from an intro standpoint, kind of your career path? How did you get to the seat that you're in?
Yeah, exactly. So I went to Ohio Wesleyan actually because I wanted to be a geography major. I wanted to make maps for a living. And luckily I was able to, and I started making maps in marketing settings in an agency setting. And so we were making maps for different marketing, major retailers, major restaurants, things like that, to where should they target their advertising based on their customer profile, their demographics, or who are they going to target? And so really I was the GIS or the map maker for the marketing department, and really through promotion and growth have taken 20 years of my career in retail, and then 2 years ago made the leap into this new industry for me, which is HVAC and plumbing. I would say that there is really nothing different between the two. It's all based on the customer, what the customer wants, what they need, and what they're willing to pay for it.
And I love hearing people's path into sort of the home services space. I mean, I didn't set out my career to work in home services, and I sort of serendipitously got there, and I just love it. I love the companies. I love the sort of there's that like the blue collar work ethic and sort of down to earthness of the whole thing. But then the industry leaders, I would say, are incredibly sophisticated in terms of how they do business, and so there's plenty of challenge there.
I think the best thing about the industry is everybody can relate. Everybody deals with hot, cold, water, right? Electricity, any of those pieces. So whether you're a renter or an owner, everybody deals with these issues, whether they're the ones paying for the repairs or the replacements, but it's very relatable for the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess talk a little bit about Granite Comfort and sort of the growth story there, and sort of where the company started, where it is today. And then you mentioned private equity back, so maybe talk a little bit more about how that came to be, and maybe how a lot of our audience are small business owners, so maybe how they should be maybe thinking about it as.
So Granite Comfort has been around for about 4 years. We again started, based out of New York City, although we all work remote. And we wanted to come to the marketplace to bring capital so that the US consumer can start to lease their HVAC or water heater. In Canada, it's a large piece of the business, and Alex Black, our chairman and founder, he had worked in the Canadian space, leasing and building that model. So he decided to really try to start it and build it here in the United States, and was seeking funding. And so we received funding from Tiger out of New York City. But really what we do is we go and find HVAC and plumbing companies around the country who want to bring the leasing model to their portfolio. It is a capital intensive process, right? So we are taking the burden of the expense of the install and the equipment and the upkeep for it. So it is an intensive capital infusion on the front side with a long-term gains over time. So it's a model that takes time.
Yeah.
But anybody who knows how an annuity works or residual income, they're very interested in that model.
And I guess for those listening who are in the trades and maybe aren't paying as much attention to other industries, I remember we had a client years ago where they were in telecommunications, basically selling small business phone systems, small, medium-sized business phone systems. And when they came to us, that business was you sold a phone system and it could be anywhere from, $15,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you owned it and maybe had some sort of small kind of maintenance deal, but it was yours to deal with. And then, the issue there was, the technology was improving so quickly that, you owned sort of this old school phone. And then, when the new features came out, it was like, well, you got to buy a whole new system. And so
Correct.
Our client went and did that switch. And so we watched where when you talk about the capital intensiveness of it, they went from where they were getting like these large lump sums to building this steady stream of recurring revenue.
Correct.
And ultimately their business became much more valuable. But that initial, 2 or 3 year kind of switch over, I remember the owner calling and saying like, we need to get the leads,
Correct.
This is like a big process. So.
Yeah, and so that's what we find from a marketing perspective is that we want to infuse money into marketing. So we may spend a little bit more than say an average growth or maintain level from an ad to sale ratio. But if we can gain that customer, install their new HVAC system on the Ease Comfort program, that extra cost per lead, it makes so much more sense to try to pay a little bit more. Maybe some people would call it a premium, but in the long term, the value of bringing that customer in, getting the equipment into their home through the lease process, not only does it take them off the table for another competitor from an install, but also from the maintenance, because we maintain the product twice a year, and it's all included. We do all the filters. There is no need for a membership, so there isn't anyone who else can come in and take that from us, if you will.
I'm really surprised in this day and age where, consumers are, I would say, I'm used to subscribing to things at this point. And, when you think of the systems, like the home comfort systems, it's like the type of thing where you just want it to be, whatever your temperature is, 72 degrees, 68 degrees, whatever it is, you just want it to be that temperature. You don't really care. I know I don't really care how it happens. Like, I don't care if it's, the system, the filter. It's like, I'd love for it to just be the way that, comfortable all the time. And so again, it sort of surprised me when I also was talking to Alex. And one of the things that he mentioned was he was talking about from like a marketing standpoint. He's like, Ben, I know you guys are in the search marketing business, and this sort of takes them, like, you may not like this because it kind of takes them out where they're not using them. And I was like, no. We love the concept of acquiring that customer, and never having them go back to Google or
Correct.
Alexa and asking, for a recommendation.
Yep.
And we're always just trying to acquire new
Correct.
new
Yep.
customers. But
Yeah,
you don't
so
want to keep winning back the folks that you've already serviced because they forgot who installed the furnace
correct.
5 years ago.
There is no bigger disappointment for a marketer, an owner, a president, a GM to see something like a Google local services ads. 50% of the calls are coming from folks that have a callback or they're scheduling their maintenance call. It is extremely disappointing. So you're right. We want to take them off the table and not have them as a customer out there for acquisition.
Right. Well, that's awesome. What, I guess from a geographic standpoint, you mentioned, sort of looking for companies all over the country. Are there particular geographic markets that you're most focused on, or is it literally anywhere? And what's the profile, maybe of a company that would be a good fit, for your model? I'm a small business owner. I don't have heirs to take over the company. I'm at that age where I need some exit options.
Yeah. So from a geography standpoint, we like extremes, right? Whether that happens both year round of hot, like in the South, or that's seasonal, that's cool, very cold in the winter and still needs air conditioning in the summer. So from a geography standpoint, there's really not a location that's off the table. We have locations in North Carolina, Texas, Illinois, and Pennsylvania so far. And again, we've had one market, our Dallas market, we own 2 businesses there. So it isn't as if that is somewhat of a test, right? To say, hey, how does buying a second company that has a different brand, how do they fit into the geographies? But that's some things that I come into play with, is looking at their trade area, understanding where their sales, their demographics, their customers, what's the overlap between the 2 businesses, but then also what's the opportunity in a market like Dallas, which has had not only a housing boom today, but it had it 25 years ago. They're all coming back into cycle for us to really help with replacement. So Dallas is just so large that having 2 organizations is completely, it's actually, we could potentially have more. It's just such a large metroplex.
Then what about maybe the profile of sort of the owner or the person running the business? Do you maybe you said this earlier and I missed it? Do you seek to, sort of work with the existing team? How does that play out?
I would say we're a little different when it comes to a traditional private equity firm. What we do is when the agreement has happened, we are looking for organizations in which the owner is going to stay on and operate. So we look for really strong management teams, not only from the owner, the GM, all the major players, because once the purchase happens, the owner becomes the president and they still run the business. And so there are incentives, of course, for them to continue to run the business and see it grow, because that is what they're here for, is to see that equity grow, to see Ease Comfort come in and allow that 4 to 8 year model to really drive that equity that they put in up front, right? All the hard work to keep their team together. So we are not a buyout. We are not a roll in and then just put in the Granite Comfort model from a management and a marketing perspective. We work with each marketing team. We work with each president to really understand. They have their own P&Ls, they manage it. And so if they use different agencies than, say, some of the current partners use, we maintain those agencies. We may evaluate it, but this is not a takeover. This is really, putting in some best practices, some KPIs that they've always wanted to have. They just weren't sure how to put them together, or pull the data to get those numbers. But really, it's just to accelerate their growth and assist them. And from all the learnings we've had from the other acquisitions.
You mentioned something. I mean, it's always great to hear, so many business owners. I mean, people are so different in terms of what they want and where their business is and what they're trying to achieve. And so, as you were saying that, one of the things that I was thinking about is just, if you've been running a business for 10 or 15 years and, a lot of small business owners, I think, kind of can sort of feel like they're on this island, and maybe they have a mixed group or whatever, but, it can be sort of lonely. And then it's also like, you don't know what you don't know. And so, one of the things that I know when I've hired folks that were kind of senior to me, or like, again, Dinesh is a good example, as a PhD, was a tenured professor in classes that I could have never gotten into as an undergrad.
Yeah.
It's intimidating on the one hand, but on the other hand, like that fire hose of learning,
Correct.
it like reinvigorates whatever love you have for the business. It's almost like it's a brand new opportunity, a brand new day. And that
Correct.
feeling of support and having a team of people that know and have a playbook.
Yeah.
For small businesses, that's a really like a rock, Granite Comfort. It's, it's that stability that you're sometimes lacking. So that's cool.
I think the other thing is that because we've done this 6 different times, and again, we'll have more acquisitions this year, is that everyone is different. However, everyone has the same goal. It's just the idiosyncrasies of the market, maybe bringing in different media or marketing channels that they've not used before. And a lot of times it's because they didn't have the resources or didn't know the best vendor. And the thing we find the most is that maybe a division, maybe they didn't utilize direct mail or PPC because, one, they didn't have the time or talent internally to even find or vet out or RFP the right agency. But a lot of times it comes down to creative. They didn't have a creative resource to execute a direct mail piece or to send out a monthly email or develop banner ads to retarget from their website. So those are the kind of things that we can come in and give them really a full service menu, if you will, of all the different opportunities that may fit their marketplace. And that really assists them to know that there is a resource like myself to help them elevate. But let me tell you, these markets are so different. So whether you're in the Scranton market or you're in the Raleigh market, those customers react to different vehicles and your market share is very different. And so we take that into consideration that, PPC may not be what is needed if you're the number one and the only one in GLSA.
Yeah. That there's so many different things that come to mind as you're talking about this. I guess one thing as it relates to like different markets, and sort of different marketing channels or marketing mediums, sort of taking a step backward. Were you in the industry, I guess, during the big shift from sort of the yellow pages as the direct response to the web? And I guess maybe talk about that if you were in this space, because I was sort of in it. That's like right where I got in. So I guess just talk about that, and then I have a bunch of I
think we're probably about the same age. So the yellow pages is something that we know we utilize as a consumer. But from a marketing channel, it started to fade away really as my career was accelerating. However, we still use yellow pages for some of the markets. And again, is it worth its value, right? With a tracking line, we can tell its value. And so the beauty is that we have a unique tracking line that we use for the yellow pages, and the ROI is there. However, it is our smallest market. So that may feel different than a major metropolitan where the yellow pages that comes to my house looks like a Reader's Digest. It's extremely small, and it isn't as known or valuable. But I always don't think of it as just the physical piece that you get, but it's the manifestation of a directory. Right. And so we use the term directory to include things like Nextdoor or Angie's List or Yelp or Thumbtack, because ultimately they are a directory, which is really what the yellow pages was or continues to be. It's just in a new form or fashion. So just as we track the yellow pages in the physical book in one of our markets, it's no different than tracking Nextdoor phone line or a Yelp phone line from another directory standpoint.
When we were first when we first started Blue Corona, we were only really in the marketing analytics space. We were in the business of tracking to the best extent that we could every channel and producing these sort of ROI, reports. And I remember being shocked, sort of our base case, the case study, which was like one of our first clients, the Yellow Pages, the cost per lead was going through the roof, the volume of leads and ROI was going straight down. And then I just, again, I sort of assumed, oh, well, me as a consumer, I never, the book goes right out on the curb the minute I get it. But then we got some companies that were on the eastern shore of Maryland, Delaware, where, they didn't even have high-speed internet in some of those areas. It was like DSL lines and things like that. And we put the tracking numbers in place and couldn't believe the volume of calls. And then in other markets, the Yellow Page reps had cut the pricing. So even though it was tougher, they had lowered the prices. We're in the DC market, which was where our first client was. The reps were coming in full rate, and it just didn't make sense. So I think what I took from it was the importance of just tracking and using the data to settle arguments instead of these anecdotal, it didn't work in Raleigh, so it will never work in Scranton or whatever.
Correct, exactly. And that again is our model, is to say, let's look at all the information. We have so much data at our fingertips, but let's evaluate it. And that's one of the reasons that Granite Comfort doesn't just come in with the playbook. Is one, I always say, we bring on vendors from acquisitions because we find new vendors or companies that are best in class, or they have some unique niche that we can bring to the other brands.
Yeah, that's really it's almost like, again, not bringing the playbook, but bringing a process for sort of figuring out the plays for the given market. I think that's fantastic. I guess along those lines, either in conversations with other folks in the industry, maybe some of the smaller business owners, what percentage of folks, I guess, what's your perception on accuracy of tracking? I mean, companies that really have no real understanding of their cost per acquisition. So you mentioned we might be willing to pay a premium because of the model. And I was thinking of man, so many of the folks that I talked to on the small side probably have no real clue what they're to get into a home.
So we look at cost per lead across all media, right? So almost like all tracking lines are outside of main lines. So what do those lines contribute? We use some different tracking sources, different companies that help us classify, and it is extremely accurate. So if you, a lot of times customers say, oh, well, we just Googled it. We can tell they use the direct mail piece, right? They scanned a QR code that was on a brochure that we left on the home, on the countertop in the home. So we are able to track it. So we bring that all together to understand how many calls did it drive. So what's our cost per call, but then how many turned into a lead? And then what is the accuracy all the way through? We match everything at the phone line level. The phone number is still king, right? We are still calling you for an appointment or confirmation you called in to us. So we match at the phone line level to say, they called in from this source and the revenue was, was X and Y. So that's where we start. We start at a cumulative level of all the vehicles that are utilized in all tracking lines and the media matchback. And then we start to dig in to say, and try to bifurcate it by media group or tactic that's of concern, right? Let's really see if the "We Miss You" postcard is driving what we expect to have versus email. Hey, we sent out a reminder. Is sending out a maintenance reminder through email more effective than outbound calling? So that's really the start to it. But then within that, as we get all the data points pulling in and really lining up PPC data or direct mail lists and matching those together, that's when we're finding a closer ROI and a cost per lead that our digital agencies such as yourself are allowed, they have the ability to target to that lead level so that we all can agree what is the right cost per lead. We do not have a universal cost per lead, and that from a Granite perspective, because some of our markets have such high market share and low media costs. So it's really, you have to keep those ratios and things alike in as consideration.
Yeah, I always kind of find myself sort of half laughing, half cringing when I see competitors advertising, that they generate leads for as low as X, $4 a lead or something. And I always think of like how different people even classify what constitutes a lead.
Right.
Is it new and existing? Do you lump them together? Is it, someone searches a branded term?
Yes.
It's like all those different things. So sort of, I know there are a handful of companies, and I think we're one of them, where we really try to parse down and get really granular with what we're actually looking at, because we don't, if we're in the new customer acquisition side, and we know the multiple channels kind of can drive someone to this conversion point, but just trying to not take credit for things that someone knew you and has used you a bunch of times and just happened to Google it, and all of a sudden we're going like, oh, look at this,
it's ours.
super low cost per lead. It's like, well, that's intellectually dishonest.
Correct.
What about things? Is there anything sort of on the marketing horizon, that you're particularly curious about or watching closely, a trend, something that you see changing?
I think, well, one, data integration, right? So this is something that we're working heavily both with your team and other partners, right? Whether it's our ERP or CRM systems that we're trying to say, hey, we know they ultimately came to us. How did they come to us? And then what is the expense for that? But keeping that all in one sort of closed loop. We love taking a phone call and knowing where it came from, all the way to knowing how much EBITDA we drove through. So we're trying to contain all of that in some form of a system, and marketing being an expense, but that drives sales. So data integration is something that is extremely important to us, and it's various pieces. It may be Google Analytics, it may be a direct mail file that we've purchased and mailed different segmented letters or postcards to. It may be schedule engine bookings, right? Or chat bookings. So form leads, all these things lead to the final transaction. While they may have come through an organic channel, it doesn't, organic is one piece. Did they use a form? Did they call us? Did they schedule it themselves? What was it that got them through the channel? Because then you can start to change potential offers. If a schedule engine lead or someone doing it themselves is so important to the business because it cuts down on a CSR time or conversion is better, is there a promotion or an offering that you can give the customer to do trial, right? To get them to utilize a self scheduling. So could you give a discount to them to try to get them to trial the product, right? Do it yourself, and see how that impacts all the way to the final dollar, versus, even trying to get them through Google My Business. So lots of touch points that we're trying to bring together to get a better picture, and then ultimately find what is making the best return.
Is it safe to say, I imagine the answer has to be yes, that you think of customer service and the customer experience as part of marketing, and that's part of when you're like, if you were to acquire companies, sort of looking at how they, when they get a web form, who responds to it, how quickly, what's their response like? I mean, there's so many companies, especially on the smaller side, where they spend so much money to get the phone to ring. And then if you actually listen to the calls and sort of do some QA on the calls, it's like 6 rings to to pick up the
Correct.
phone, and then a long delay, and the person answering is eating a sandwich while they're,
Correct.
on the phone with the homeowner. It's bizarre.
So the training that's required at the CSR level is imperative, right?
Yeah.
So I always say we can get them to the phone, we can make it ring. But after that, you have to put just as much energy into the training and the conversion. And I have not seen it. Well, people like a Nordstrom, they're best in class, or a Zappos, right? They are best in class. Ritz-Carlton, places like that. But again, why is that? They empower the CSR, right? They empower anybody who answers the phone to help the customer. So it is really important. But the other thing is that you have to you can do all sorts of different marketing programs and use lots of different channels and have different promotions. But if you do not keep the CSR in the loop of what that is, it is a total failure. So that is one of the things that we put together every month is, these are the marketing campaigns. It is for the CSR. Here's the physical look of the piece. Because a lot of times you listen to the call and they say, well, I have this postcard. It's all black and white. And the CSR can actually look at their PDF that we send them to say, oh, yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that is your We Miss You postcard. Things like that, because you don't want to lose them in that process. And so keeping it organized, right? But then disseminating it through the team. It's just as important. The technician comes to the home and they see this letter that's on their countertop or a brochure, and how do they interact? What is the purpose, right? Hey, if the technician knows this is a letter for replacement, they really have a better way to help and sell it. So I think you have to make sure that you're buttoned up at each of the levels, but you're only as good as the CSR, right? And you're only as good as the technician who knows what to do. So it really is every step of the way that is super important. But the other thing is we always try to make sure everybody is in the know of other major pieces. Last week, sent out a huge email to existing customers. Hey, we're going to send it out at this time. Let's make sure we have full staff, right? So what time is that you guys feel like you'd be the most prepared to take phone calls? Okay, that's when we'll send the email out. Again, it's always that conversation back and forth. And the larger you get, the more people that become involved, more CSRs, more marketing efforts, more technicians. So just keeping everybody on the same page is super important.
Amazing. I remember when I was in college, I got a business degree, and then I got a second in organizational communications, only because I took all these electives, and I was like, oh, if I just take a couple more classes, I'll have this second degree. And my dad, who's an engineer, was like, why in the world are you getting a degree in organizational communication? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, blah, 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 blah. And then years later, we sort of joke around about how I don't use anything hardly for my business classes. I mean, I know accounting and all that, but what you learn in Accounting 101 and what you use as a business owner, like,
it's very different.
A lot different. And certainly on the marketing side, case studies with like Coca-Cola or Xerox, it's like, yes, there were things learned, but applied to small business, there's a gap there. But the communication aspect and just what you talked about, I mean, I think of that as like, on the one hand, it's such a simple thing, keeping everyone in line, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. It requires a discipline and just a relentlessness of communication, and you just can never stop. It's not like it's hard. I mean, it's not complicated. It's just, you have to keep that drumbeat going. So that's the lesson.
It's actually very simple. If your focus is always about the customer, right? And everybody hears me always, this is something that I talk about all the time, is focus on the customer. When you call in and you have got a flooding situation in your home, and again, if a CSR answers the phone and they're not as empathetic, it puts more anxiety on the customer, right? They have a harder time focusing on when to schedule the appointment or what is needed. And so really understanding every time that phone rings, it's not because they wanted to call, they needed to call. And so really having that customer focus first. is something that I really try to emphasize. A lot of times we can lose that focus, right? Oh, we've been to their house before. We know their equipment. It's in the system. But really, if you're in the home, really understanding what the customer is saying, their concern, or answering their questions, because along the way, just as we said, every way is another way that we sell the customer on us.
I mean, almost as I was thinking about even your business model, sort of at the top level, and I was kind of saying as a homeowner, I don't really care about all the little details of the system. I just want it to work and, not have any issues. And sort of that customer first mentality, starting at the business model all the way down to every part of the execution. It sounds like that's like a core thing for you guys, and probably, a huge reason for the success that you've had and, continue to have.
So can you imagine saying, hey, we'd like to own the equipment, you lease it from us, but you don't really trust us, and you really don't want to see us in your home twice a year, right? You as the sales team, the CSRs, the technicians, you have to build trust with the customer if you want to put a long-term relationship in place. And so again, that it's super imperative. And I do think in today's day and age, again, back to the yellow pages, everybody used to say, oh, just have a company that starts with A, so you're at the top of the yellow pages, right? And now you get so many choices. You don't answer the phone in 6 rings, you go to the next listing. So it is different potentially than just receiving customers calling in. You're really earning their business at every step of the way.
I haven't looked into this in a while, and I'm sure our team has. So, this is just my not being in the details at this level, but I would imagine that kind of in the age of assistants, the home assistants, Alexa and Google Home and all that, I have to kind of speak quietly or my assistants will start responding to me. But I would almost imagine, teaching it the skill where if the customer does have a relationship with you, that can become just a direct link. And say, again, kind of taking them out of the who's near me and more of get my go-to people on the phone, or send them a message type of thing.
Correct.
Is that something that you guys are thinking about, or I don't know if it's there yet, but
we are doing some work on the search side where you're taking the context of their search and we are retargeting them really before a PPC lead, right? So let's just say they type in plumbing guy, let's say plumbing guy near me who focuses on water heaters. That is not what we buy as keywords, right? But that is what the customer types in first. And so being there in the context in which they sit down or they type or they speak into a speaker, what are those words that they're using, the phrases that you will never be able to guess from a PPC, geo-qualified or branded and non-branded and long tail. I mean, this would be the super duper long tail, right? Is what the customer puts in on that first search. It is not as clean and cut as we think it is in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Alison, is there anything, sort of anything that you're focused on now in 2022? Anything that you want to sort of leave folks with, something you would like to spotlight? Anything?
Yeah, I think for us, it's again, all about the customer, but I always, if people say, oh, I don't have enough data, the best data you have is you have their name, their address, their city, state, zip. I encourage everybody to use the tools that they have. You can download your data from your system, even if it's a pretty basic system. And in Excel alone, you can map your entire customer list for free. It does not take a GIS, a cartographer, a map maker to do this. This is now all just built into Excel, just like a pivot table. You can get a good understanding of where your customers are coming from, maybe what their category of spend and what they're doing. So really understanding and being educated on who your current customers are, where your trucks are running to, then it can allow you to grow that trade area, potentially across category. So again, I always encourage everybody, use the data you have today. It doesn't have to be, 47 track lines. You have data in which you've serviced the customer, you know what product you sold them or what service was produced for that. So always mine your own data first, because if you can do that, your agencies will be so much better off, right? They will have insights that you are looking at that they can assist with as well. I think, so I always encourage everybody, you have great data to start with. Start there and spread it to the team. Give it to the GM, give it to the install manager, the service manager, CSR manager. Those are all components that everybody can benefit from. I think the other thing is you always need to understand what the competition is doing. It doesn't mean you need to compare or you don't need to beat them or meet them. It's just really understanding. Again, you can go to their websites, you can search what their promotions or offers are, and it can sometimes give the level of hunger, right? So deep promotions or unusual promotions can really be somewhat of a signal in the industry. But I also think it's just utilizing all the tools in the digital space has probably been the biggest success and the biggest struggle, right? Because once you feel like you've mastered it, something changes. Right? LSA adds another category, or more people are allowed in, so it's crowded when it comes to LSA in certain markets, or the results page is changed, right? Or Google puts out another algorithm. And so for us, all these things that we're trying to potentially chase or spend time chasing, again, you focus on the customer, give them great service, and get them hooked into a product like Ease or a membership, you are doing the best you can do. And so use that, make sure that every call, it's priceless, right? Every call that you receive is the first opportunity for growth.
Everything that you're saying in that regard makes me, you mentioned Zappos earlier. I think the book's called Delivering Happiness, that Tony Hsieh, who unfortunately passed away,
Yeah.
But he wrote that book. And I remember the part that I loved about that was sort of, there was like I love the contrarian, stories where he's kind of like, traditional call centers are measured according to all these metrics. And we just said, well, what if we just didn't worry about, the time that they're spending on the call or all these, and just let them try to make the customers happy, what would happen? And all of a sudden, it just takes off. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting, again, if you think about what makes you happy, if you're disappointed with a service, what is it that turns the corner? What is it that call back? A lot of times right now it happens in Google reviews, right? Where you're doing a review and we're triaging it after the fact, right? With a low score on a review. What if we didn't do what we did and we didn't have 3 reviews across different platforms that we're triaging? So I think the other thing is trial, right? Try things out, see if they work, but put in some metrics or some expectations of results to say, did it work or did it not? And so that always try something, right? We do a couple different, we have the luxury across 6 brands to do a lot of different trial, and many times it's the bigger brands that take some of those pieces, some of the expense that you may be doing testing with, but even A/B testing your direct mail, A/B testing your email subject lines, all of these little pieces are super important, to gaining traction, to see what's working, and just to keep moving and growing. That is key.
You've mentioned so many different things. I mean, the customer first and the connected data and kind of getting all the data in one place and looking at your data, sort of first starting with what you already have, and that really, can be done, even at it's probably a pretty detailed level. I mean, with some basic tools, like you don't need a PhD in data analytics to evaluate your customer base, and then sharing what you find with your team. I saw one company that pulled all these insights out of their customer data and turned it into almost like, wasn't Jeopardy, but they sort of got their office staff together, and I think even the technicians, and sort of put some things up like, what do you think's our most, highest revenue zip code, and like, who are our top, what, they were going through these different, questions, and and some people get things right, and then other people like, wow, there's no way that's right, just eye-opening stuff.
Yeah.
So there are ways to make it fun, to engage the team.
Engaging, for sure.
Yeah.
And as you get bigger, it's harder, and you need some of those tools to be able to communicate to the larger group.
Yeah. Well, what's the best way for someone who wants to learn more, who has a business, maybe they want to take it to the next level, or they'd like to explore, sort of a partnership, or being, becoming part of the family? Where do they go to learn more?
Yeah, so if you go to granitecomfort.com, under you will see a page that talks a little bit about us, and an opportunity. There's actually a form you can fill in. It's called confidential, and it goes straight into our development team, and of course to our CEO, Alex Black. But it is a way to kind of put your toe in the water. We do lots of different intro calls to different organizations. But again, I always tell, if you're interested in selling your company or looking into what does private equity mean, talk to multiple people, because they're not all the same, right? Every private equity firm not only treats the acquisition in a different way, they pay in a different manner, right?
Yeah.
So talk to a lot of different firms, because there may just be that one that's the best for you. It's sort of like going to college. Don't just go on one college tour. Go and experience different campuses and different universities, and see what fits for you.
And I think the talking to other people, and also sort of the firsthand, I know that people get into business and they hear things, maybe from a trusted advisor or someone. Like, I had heard things about private equity when I was starting my career, but that was so long ago that by the time it really started becoming kind of closer to home, I realized that I had all these, like, kind of a bias or a filter, and I would hear private equity, and it was associated in my mind with a bunch of things that are categorically not accurate today, or with certain firms. So I think, for folks that kind of go in with a little bit of a blank slate, and to explore it, because I hear, especially in the small business world, some of the folks are very alpha, and they have very strong opinions that are not based on a whole lot of great objective fact.
Yeah. So we're a Nexstar partner. And so again, going to different Nexstar events or super meeting and things like that, that is the one thing when we sit down and talk to people or just get to know people, that is not the first thing out of our mouth, because it may have a misconception, right? Versus getting to understand what is our business model first. It's very different than just saying, we're a private equity firm, because it doesn't always mean the same thing.
Yeah. Well, Alison, this was great. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this. And for folks that want to learn more, go to Granite Comfort's website.
Great. Excellent.
The journey starts there.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben and the team.